Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Usma Parang Saparivrajavacharya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, and welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for your attendance as we continue covering Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 10, verses 20 to 27. This is basically the last part of this chapter, Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. And it's basically 20 to 36. We're going to break it up in 2 sessions, this week and next week, and we'll complete this wonderful chapter. Om Jnana Timivandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmei Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Pradantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Mitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Shastra Piyusha Sarva Vedeka Satvala Sarva Siddhantaratnadya Sarva Lokai Triprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalidvando Diraditya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churn from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you are enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you who grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna, who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pathaya Prema Varshasya Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute O Srimad Bhagavatam. I offer respectful obeisance unto you by reading you unattained transcendental bliss. For your syllables rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are an incarnation of Lord Krishna. Mad ekabando mad sangim mad guru mad mahadana man nishtarka mad bhagya manananda namastute O Srimad Bhagavatam. O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. Asadu sadhu tadahi natini chochataraka hanam chakada chinmam premna ritkatiyospura O Srimad Bhagavatam. O give of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplift the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest in my heart, my throat, accompany pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Janmadyasya Yatonvayaditarata Charte Swabhigna Swarat, Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya, Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatrati Sargom Risha, Damna Svena Sadani Rastakwakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance to you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he's the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destructions of the manifested universes. He's directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations and is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge and Tahata Brahmachi, the original loving being. By him, even great sages and demigods are placed in delusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him, the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of the 3 modes of nature appear effectual, though they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, because Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally exists in transferable, which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayana Paisha Sabya Kalavismin Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagyo Padartha. O learned one in this iron age of Kali, many but short lives, that quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayam namaskritya dharachevam narotam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, and the Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhaktira dokshaja ahitukya pratyata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which man can attain to loving devotional service under the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatyusa Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahitukam. By rendering devotional service under the personality of God, Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causes knowledge and detachment from the world. Vedanti Tattvavidas Tattvam Yat Gnanam Advayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Sabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth calls non-dual substance Brahman Paramatma Bhagavan. Shrushrushoshadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahatsevaya Viprapnya Tirtha Nishevana. O wise born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shranutam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ryadanta Stoya Badrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastaprayashu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. By regular attendance in class in the Bhagavatam, by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna and welcome. Let us cover some feedback from Canto 1, Chapter 8, verses 15 to 19, which we covered last week. Please share any of your realizations from last week's session, what you remembered, what you liked from Prabhupada's purports, what points you found very amazing and astounding. Please share that in the chat so that we can recap and refresh our memory. Madhachana Siddhi says, Hare Krishna, the soul is beautiful because Krishna is beautiful. Srila Prabhupada made the point that one should appreciate the beauty coming from Krishna, and it is for the pleasure of Krishna, not for our exploitation. Yes, wonderful point where Srila Prabhupada analyzes real beauty, and Prabhupada makes the point that nobody will be attracted to a beautiful doll, a wooden doll, and even a beautiful woman that is dead, nobody would be interested in her. Why? Because this real beauty lies with the spiritual spark. And if that spiritual spark is not in the body, then there is really no beauty there. So real beauty actually is coming from the soul, and we can extend that further. The soul is part and parcel of Krishna, coming from Krishna. So therefore, why is the soul beautiful? Because Krishna is beautiful. And when a soul is connected to the all-attractive, beautiful personality, then that soul becomes even more beautiful. So real beauty is Krishna's beauty. We can even see all the beautiful things that are within this world. Krishna says, it's a spark of my splendor. So when we see anything that's attractive to us, we should reflect that this attractive potency, this attractive nature, this attractive attribute is really Krishna's attraction. Krishna is attracting us to him, to his lotus feet in this way. Sharini says, Haribo, please accept Mahabharata obeisance and appreciation. Whenever I see something beautiful, I must remember everything beautiful and wonderful arises out of just a spark of Krishna's splendor. Beauty, however, is not to be exploited. Yes. So, both of you all made the point that we don't exploit beauty, we appreciate beauty, and we then offer that beauty back to Krishna. This is the most appropriate way to glorify Krishna, to use everything that belongs to Krishna for Krishna's glorification. Rasaraj Atmapriya Maharaji says, as soon as lusty desires awaken, the senses, mind, soul, religious principles, intelligence, memory, shyness, and beauty is vanquished. We see this question that Arjuna presents in Bhagavad Gita. What forces someone apparently against his own will and intelligence to act sinfully? And Lord Krishna replies, it is lust only. And lust not only allows one to engage in sinful activities, but it also destroys all these wonderful traits that are there. One's control of senses, the mind, soul, religious principle, intelligence, memory, shyness, beauty. This is all vanquished by lust. So we can see how lust is a very, very sinful enemy. Krishna says, all devouring sinful enemy. And therefore we have to, with Krishna consciousness, consistent, regular, determined, serious Krishna consciousness, purify our lives of lust. Amavati says, shyness of the ladies and their talks were pleasing because it was about Krishna. Yes. And today we're going to be covering a little more about what were they talking about? What was the content of the talks? Anybody would like to unmute and share, you're most welcome to as well. All right, any other feedback before we continue? Okay. Thank you very much for your feedback. Let us continue. So in today's verses, we're going to be covering the last part of this chapter. We're going to be hearing about the talks of the ladies of Hastinapur. And they are ladies, and generally ladies are simple, generally simple in nature. And we're going to hear what these simple ladies know about Krishna. So we're going to be covering just in two sections. So we'll cover till, I think, text 26, 27, and then the rest of the sections we'll cover next week. So text 20. Anyonyan asit sanjalpa uttama sloka chetasam kauravendra purat strinam sarvashruti manohara. Absorbed in the thought of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is glorified in select poetry, the ladies on the roofs of all the houses of Hastinapur began to talk of him. This talk was more attractive than the hymns of the Vedas. Mother Lasha's feedback, she says, Krishna is absolute, is even glorified as Chora, even in the material world, considers this undesirable. Yes. And we find here in this verse, Uttama Sloka, and we read the song by Srila Bhivamanga Thakur using choicest poetry to glorify Krishna as the greatest thief. So that was a wonderful song. Even though thievery is a quality that's not glorified and accepted in this material world, but Krishna, even as a thief, is glorified. So Uttama Sloka, that person who's glorified in select poetry. The talks of the ladies in Hastinapur was even more attractive than the hymns of the Vedas. So these are simple ladies who did not learn Sanskrit, who did not perform severe austerities, but they loved Krishna. In the previous section, we heard how their love for Krishna was manifesting in the form of tears, and they were checking those tears because they did not want to create any inauspiciousness for the beloved Lord Shri Krishna. Now we're going to hear, even though they loved Krishna, they had knowledge of Krishna. It wasn't just sentimental love. It wasn't based on a foundation that did not have substance of the tattva, the truth of Krishna. And through these verses that we're going to be covering, it's going to be very clear that these ladies, they were educated, or they knew and had knowledge of Krishna. Very profound, very, very powerful knowledge about Krishna, which amplified their love for Krishna. So Prabhupada in the purport says in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that in all the Vedic literatures, the goal is the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna. Factually, the glories of the Lord are depicted in such literatures as the Vedas, Ramayana, and Mahabharata. And in the Bhagavatam, they are specifically mentioned in respect to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, while the ladies on the tops of the houses in the capital of the kings of the Kuru dynasty were talking about the Lord, their talk was more pleasing than the Vedic hymns. Anything sung in the praise of the Lord is Shruti mantra. There are songs of Thakur Narottam Das, one of the acharyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, composed in simple Bengali language. But Thakur Vishnu Chakravarti, another very learned acharya of the same Sampradaya, has approved the songs by Thakur Narottam Das to be as good as Vedic mantras. And this is so because of the subject matter. So the first point that Srila Prabhupada is making the purport is that any glorification is really also Vedic mantra or Shruti mantra. And he's using the example of the songs of Narottam Das Thakur. Srila Narottam Das Thakur was empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deposited his love in the Padma river and told Goddess Padma river too, that when Narottam Das Thakur comes and bathes in your water, you take you take this love of mine and you give it to him. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally gave his own love to Narottam Das Thakur, and Narottam Das Thakur was empowered to sing so beautifully that just through his singing, he would infuse those who hear his songs in glorification with pure love of Krishna. So very, very exalted and powerful acharya in our line. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is approving that the songs written by Narottam Das Thakur are Vedic mantras. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs are Vedic mantras. So songs that are composed, poetry that's composed in line with the truth of Krishna consciousness is also Vedic mantra. It's also part of the Vedic repertoire of knowledge. And therefore, the songs, the poetry that's composed in line with the Vedas are beautiful. Then Prabhupada continues and says that the language is immaterial, but the subject matter is important. The medium that you're using is not so important, but the content is more important. I remember one time, one of my friends was going door to door in Indonesia, selling calendars, and he knocked on one door. It was a Gujarati house, and the person opened the door, Gujarati gentleman, and he told my devotee friend, who was from a Gujarati speaking background, that if you don't speak Gujarati, you can't come inside. So people get caught up in their mother tongue, in their own language, etc. And that's good, but better than that is to appreciate the content, immaterial of the language. And we see how Srila Prabhupada, with such expertise, using a unrefined language compared to Sanskrit, like English, used that language on the order of his spiritual master, who said use English language and broadcast Krishna consciousness, the most glorious content. And Prabhupada did this magnificent miracle, you could say, because to explain the scriptures in a language that is not refined is not an easy task. So the language is immaterial, but the subject matter is important. The ladies who were all absorbed in the thought and actions of the Lord developed the consciousness of Vedic wisdom by the grace of the Lord. And therefore, although such ladies might not have been very learned scholars in Sanskrit or otherwise, still whatever they spoke was more attractive than the Vedic hymns. So because of the absorption, because of them thinking of Krishna, Divya Gyan Hirde Prakashito, this knowledge, when we really connect to the powerhouse of Krishna consciousness, when that connection becomes strong, solid, then Divya Gyan Hirde Prakashita, this knowledge will manifest in our heart. The challenge is that our connection is either rusty, and therefore because of the wiring being rusty, then the electricity does not flow through, or we don't even connect into the power source, right? Or the connection is very fickle, and therefore the electricity of Krishna does not move strongly. But if we really connect seriously to the powerhouse of Krishna, then Divya Gyan Hirde Prakashito, like we see in terms of these ladies of Hastinapur. So why is the talk of Krishna more attractive and pleasing? Prabhupada says the Vedic hymns in the Upanishads are sometimes indirectly directed to the Supreme Lord, but the talks of the ladies were directly spoken of the Lord, and thus they were more pleasing to the heart. The ladies' talk appeared to be more valuable than the learned Brahmana's benedictions. We recollect in the previous verses, the Brahmanas were giving benedictions to Krishna because he's living. And the verse said that that was appropriate and also not appropriate. So here it's described that the ladies' talks were even more valuable than those blessings. See, Krishna, they're giving blessings to Krishna, but they're not giving pleasure to Krishna. They're wishing Krishna well, but they're not giving pleasure to Krishna. The ladies, they don't know how to create, auspiciousness by chanting mantras and the rituals, etc. They're just simple ladies doing their household duties. But because they were speaking about Krishna, that gave Krishna far, far more pleasure than the Brahmana's benedictions. And because they were speaking directly of Krishna, that is the reason why it was more pleasing than the Vedic hymns. Because many of the Vedic hymns are indirectly glorifying Krishna. That is why Narad Muni instructed Srila Vyasadeva that Vyasadeva, we know that Vyasadeva experienced lack of satisfaction. And why was he not satisfied? Because he had given all the Vedas, but not directly glorified Krishna. And therefore Bhagavatam is glorious because it is directly glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here we see these sets of verses coming, presented in the Bhagavatam, of these simple ladies, but very, very pleasing to Krishna because it is directly glorifying Krishna. And we're going to hear the amazing knowledge that these lovers of Krishna had. Before we can love Krishna, we must appreciate Krishna's opulence, Krishna's magnanimity, Krishna's greatness. And therefore you find throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, many of the verses and the earlier chapters are focusing on creation, on Krishna's power, Krishna's magnificence, Krishna's greatness. So when we appreciate Krishna's opulences, then we proceed to cultivate our relationship and love for Krishna. And that love is solidly founded, it's grounded, it's cemented. If we just jump to loving Krishna without really understanding or having the knowledge of and the truth of who Krishna is, then either it leads to sahajya, or we take Krishna very cheap, or we can be very offensive. So we want to make sure that we don't minimize knowledge of Krishna consciousness, knowledge of Krishna, because that is very, very important as a foundation, especially for those who are aspiring to become lovers of Krishna. Knowledge of Krishna is very, very important as the foundation to build our love upon. We can only love someone we know. And the more we know about that person, the more our love intensifies and increases. At the same time, when we know about Krishna and his greatness, it also breeds submission and surrender. In contrast, Srila Prabhupada would always warn us against cheap presentation of loving Krishna. Prabhupada one time was traveling to Chennai, and he was staying at a home, or visited a home of a family that was worshipping Ladu Gopal. And you see a picture of Ladu Gopal. And they were sitting, and with Srila Prabhupada and the family members, the couple that was hosting Srila Prabhupada, they asked Srila Prabhupada, please tell us about Rasa dance, Rasa Leela. And Prabhupada, he said, no, it's not time. It's not the right time. And they said, no, Swamiji, please tell us about Rasa Leela. We like to hear about Rasa Leela. And Prabhupada said, no, it's not appropriate. And they said, no, but Prabhupada, we like to hear. We qualify to hear about Rasa dance. And Prabhupada said, you qualify to hear, but I'm not qualified to speak. So by his own example, Prabhupada illustrated and showed us that we should be very careful when we enter into the intimate pastimes of Krishna, without having solid Krishna consciousness. And they would, worship Ladu Gopal. So one day they dressed Krishna in black. And Prabhupada asked them, why they dress Krishna in black. And they said, no, because Krishna is so effulgent, and his effulgence is blocking. We can't see him so beautiful. So we put black, to cover, camouflage the effulgence. And the devotee that was worshipping, the wife that was worshipping Ladu Gopal, at one point, now another time, she dropped Ladu Gopal on the floor while bathing or worshipping. And she didn't like have the mood or the attitude of forgiveness, begging forgiveness. She just picked up Ladu Gopal and said, oh, Ladu Gopal, you like to play around, why are you jumping off my hand? So that attitude wasn't appreciated by Srila Prabhupada. That we don't appreciate and we don't understand who Krishna is. And because we don't understand who Krishna is, then our relationship, when we have that love, is very sentimental or very superficial, right? And that means that our love is not according to how the acharyas want us to develop that love. It's not according to how Sri Mahaprabhu want us to develop that love. So therefore the system, the process that Srila Prabhupada has given us, according to the authorities coming in our line, is founded first and foremost, not just on loving God, but first on understanding God, knowing about God. And once we know about God and apply the process of purification of Krishna consciousness with that knowledge, then our dormant love, when it revives, will be sustained, and we will be able to become serious lovers of Krishna. So now let us hear what knowledge did these ladies have about Krishna. What were they speaking about? Their talks wasn't prajalpa. Their talks wasn't gramya katha, wasn't village talk. Oh, did you hear about this? Oh, did you see this? Oh, did you, hear about what this person said? Or fault finding or criticism. No, their general talks was about Krishna. And why was the general talks about Krishna? Because they love Krishna. So the more we love Krishna, the more it will reflect in our activities, in our words, in our actions, in our thoughts, in our dreams, in our desires, and ultimately in our destination. So we want to be able to gauge that if I'm deviating from my goal and my destination, I want to check that, specifically in relation to talking. Srila Prabhupada, in a lecture, he says, simultaneously discussion of Vedic knowledge at the same time, very beautiful. That if you talk of Krishna consciousness, then you talk of all the Vedas. Sarva Shruti Manohara, you talk of Vedic knowledge. But if you simply talk of Vedic knowledge, it becomes dry, speculative. But if you talk of Krishna, Krishna's Leela, Krishna's pastimes, then it becomes simultaneous discussion of Vedic knowledge and at the same time very beautiful. Therefore, Krishna is described here, Uttama Sloka. Krishna is never described by ordinary verses, Uttama Sloka. Uttama Sloka means, Uttama means also liberated. Ut means transcendental. One who has crossed, Utkata. Ut means one who has gone to the other side. Tama means this darkness, this world, this material world. So Uttama, transcending darkness, verses that glorify Krishna, they allow us to transcend darkness. Simply, we have tried to explain Krishna, nothing but Krishna. Just like we are presenting so many books about Krishna, simply we have tried to explain Krishna with all these translations, nothing but Krishna, how to understand Krishna. So here it is called Sarva Shruti Mano Hara. Krishna is very pleasing to hear. Krishna is the reservoir of pleasure. When we get our attachment for hearing about Krishna, then at least we can consider that we have become free from material contamination. When we get attachment simply for hearing Krishna, nothing else, all nonsense, then you should understand that you have become liberated. These are the tests. Everyone can get this position because there is a process. If you follow the process, then you come to the real stage. It's a very powerful point by Srila Prabhupada. Becoming attached to hearing about Krishna. And if we come to that stage of becoming attached to hearing about Krishna, Prabhupada says, you become free from material contamination, you become liberated just by hearing about Krishna. So therefore, Krishna consciousness is very simple. We simply have to offer our ears, engage in the hearing process. This hearing process, we should never underestimate or minimize the hearing process of Krishna consciousness. It is extremely powerful. We should engage in devotional service, at the same time sufficiently hear about Krishna. And by doing these two processes hand in hand, then we can very effectively purify our life, and as Prabhupada says, come to the real stage of Krishna consciousness, because there's a process of practicing Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada is also making the point that he's given so much about Krishna, and if we absorb our mind in relation to the topics and subject and the content Srila Prabhupada has given us, this will also manohara, this will also satisfy the mind, satisfy the heart, satisfy the senses, and ultimately satisfy the real self, simply by giving oral reception to the content or reading the content that Srila Prabhupada has given us, because it is all about Krishna, and Krishna is a reservoir of all pleasure. Text 21. Savaikil layam purusha puranato ya eka asid avishesha atmani agre gunebhyo jagat atmanishware nimilitatman nishisupta shaktishu. They said, here he is, the original personality of Godhead, as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge, as if sleeping at night, their energy suspended. So now we're hearing what they were talking about. So if we just analyze this verse, they knew, or they know, that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. Purusho Purana Puratano. They know that he existed before the material creation, even before the modes of nature. They know that the living entities merge into Krishna as if suspended in sleep. So we can see, even though they were simple ladies, but they knew the truth of Krishna. Prabhupada in the purport talks in relation to this aspect of the living entities merging into the Supreme Personality of God. There are two types of dissolution of the manifested cosmos. At the end of every 4,320,000,000 years, solar years, when Brahma, Lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there is one annihilation. And at the end of Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, in our calculation at the end of 8,640,000,000 times 30 times 12 times 100, which works out to 311,040,000,000,000 years, solar years. There is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both the material energy are called the Mahatattva, or the material energy, and the marginal energy are called Jiva Tattva, merge in the person of the Supreme Lord. The living beings remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there is another creation of the material world. And that is the way of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material manifestation. Material creation is affected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, set in action by the Lord. And therefore it is said here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. In the Shruti mantra it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation. There was no Brahma, Shiva, or the other demigods. Vishnu means Mahavishnu, who is lying in the coastal ocean. By his breathing only all the universes are generated in seeds and gradually develop into gigantic forms with innumerable planets within each and every universe. The seeds of the universes develop into gigantic forms in the way the seeds of a banyan tree develop into numberless banyan trees. This topic we covered previously, we'll cover it and cover it again, and we'll cover it again in the second canto, third canto, future cantos. It's repeated in different pastimes according to the different devotees that are glorified. So here we hear that the ladies, they knew about Krishna's involvement in creation. And Prabhupada is describing the aspect of dissolution. So in the 12th canto, it is described that there are 4 types of cosmic annihilation: occasional, elemental, continuous, and ultimate, all of which are affected by the inherent potency of the Supreme Lord. Learned scholars have designated this topic dissolution. So the first type of annihilation, called Naimittika, which is occasional, which Prabhupada explains in the beginning of the purport. This is at Brahma's night. So Lord Brahma, he gets up in the morning, he creates. In the night when he sleeps, there's destruction of the 3 planetary systems. Morning he gets up, he creates, then there's destructions. This is how Brahma's life goes. And when Brahma is born, creation, the universal creation manifestation begins. When Brahma's life ends, then the universal destruction is there. So a universe is created and destroyed according to Brahma's birth and death, which is long, 311,040,000,000,000 years, but that's beginning of creation and destruction. So when Brahma goes to rest, then there is Naimittika, occasional destruction. The universe is not destroyed, but the planetary systems are destroyed. Then the next form of this cosmic annihilation is called Prakritya, which is elemental. That means total or total material. Sometimes the word is used, elemental or total material annihilation. That's at the end of Brahma's life. That means the whole universe is now destroyed. Then there's Nitya, which is continuous annihilation, or what is described here as constant annihilation. And this is according to the time factor. So everyone in this material world is constantly, continuously being destroyed by the time factor. We are coming closer and closer to being destroyed in different ways. So for example, we're going to leave this world due to death. That's a destructive aspect. We also continuously been destroyed because ultimately creation will also come to an end. So in this way, the time factor is destroying everything. And then the fourth type of destruction is called atyantika, or ultimate, final. And this ultimate or final destruction is when we get transcendental knowledge of the absolute truth. So when we get knowledge of Krishna consciousness, when we get knowledge of Krishna, then this is liberation. This is real destruction of our material existence. The other forms of destructions will basically mean that when the material creation universe is destroyed, all the jivas, living entities in that universe, go back into Mahavishnu's body in a slumber stage. They stay there for some time until Mahavishnu breathes again. As soon as he breathes again, universes creation starts, universes are created, and the cycle starts again, and the living entities are impregnated into that universe, and they are given the chance to continue their karmic cycle. So in this way, that cycle of karma continues. It is not that when the living entities go into Mahavishnu's body that they cease to exist or their karma cease to exist. No, their karma is just put on pause and then play again once they come out. But when we become Krishna conscious, now we are becoming liberated, and that liberation is basically a final annihilation of our material existence. Prabhupada continues in the purport. Thus, Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of Lord Shri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita as follows. Quote, let me offer my respectful obeisance to the personality of Godhead, Govinda, whose plenary portion is the Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his annihilation and exhalation. He's excelling after the universes are generated from the pause of his transcendental body. Unquote. Thus, Govinda, or Lord Krishna, is the cause of Mahavishnu also. The ladies talking about this Vedic truth must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matters definitely. There is no alternative. And we see, for us, we know about Mahavishnu, just like it's rest assured that majority, 99% of all those who are connected to Hinduism in some form or shape know about Vishnu, but they only know about one Vishnu. And in most cases, that one Vishnu, which they show and present, is lying on the bed, serpent bed, with Lakshmi Devi massaging his lotus feet. They don't know that there is actually three Vishnus. Even when, my own case, I was born in a Hindu family, had some roots in terms of religion, but it was only by Srila Prabhupada's books and mercy that I began to learn about the three Vishnus. Mahavishnu, whose picture we see here, and then within that universe is the classic Vishnu that most, practically all Hindus know. That's the second Vishnu. And then the third Vishnu is the super soul. So these three Purusha avatars was never known to us before Srila Prabhupada. And by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we are able to understand. These ladies, they knew about Mahavishnu. So how did they know about Mahavishnu? Because they learned it from authoritative sources. The merging of the living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean that the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there, and as soon as there is another creation of the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping, inactive living beings are again let loose to begin their activities in the continuation of the past different spheres of life. It is called Suptotita Naya, or awakening from sleep, and again engaging in one's respective continuous duty. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of his awakening state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do and thus engages himself again in his prescribed activities. The living being also remains merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation. But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8:18-20. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not a product of material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there is no difference between his body and himself. Therefore, before creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one. So the ladies of Hastinapur, they could understand that Krishna created the creation. And because Krishna created the creation, Krishna existed before the creation, Krishna existed before the modes of material nature, which implies that before creation and before the modes, if Krishna existed, he is not material and is not made up of the modes of material nature. He himself is spiritual and transcendental. And from that platform, he creates matter and the modes of material nature. So they could appreciate that personality that they love and that they are seeing leaving Hastinapur, that personality is spiritual. Even though they are able to see him walking, they are able to see him like an ordinary person, apparently an ordinary person, but they have full knowledge that actually here is a person who is the source of all creation, and his body is totally transcendental. Text 22. Sa eva bhuyo nijja virvyakon koditam swajiva mayam prakritim shukrit shatim anama rupat mani rupana namani vidit samanon shashara shastrakrit. The personality of Godhead, again, desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels and living entities, place them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Now they're talking about how the living entity, because of his own desire, are given names and forms, but they are part and parcel of Krishna. They are placed under the guidance of material nature. And by Krishna's potencies, material nature is empowered to recreate. So we see they're very, very learned. They know how Krishna is creating, maintaining, and keeping the living entities in bondage. Prabhupada in the purport. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord. There are two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bada. The Nitya Mukta are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord in his eternal abode beyond the manifested mundane creation. But the Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to his external energy, Maya, for rectification of the rebellious attitude towards the Supreme Father. So we heard about these two categories of living entities, the Nitya Mukta, who are in the spiritual world, and the Nitya Bada, who are us in the material world. And we are entrusted to the material energy. Why? Because for rectification of our rebellious attitude towards the Supreme Father. The quicker we learn the lesson, the less trouble we will go through. And what's the lesson that we have to learn? The lesson is we have become rebellious, or we've cultivated a rebellious attitude towards the Supreme Father. We do not want to surrender to Krishna. We do not want to serve Krishna. We do not want to glorify Krishna. We want to exploit Krishna's resources. And because of that, we are given to Maya for rectification. Nitya Baddhas are eternally forgot. Nitya Baddhas are eternally forgetful of their relationship with the Lord as parts and parcels. They are bewildered by illusory energy as products of matter, and thus they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end of a certain period, as mentioned above. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita as follows. Quote, O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all the living entities merge into my nature. And again, when the time of creation is ripe, I begin creation by the agency of my external energy, unquote. The word Bhuya indicates again and again. That is to say, the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. He is the cause of everything. But the living being who are constantly parts and parcels of the Lord are forgetful of the sweet relation, are given a chance again to rid of the clutches of the external energy and to revive his living being's consciousness. The revealed scriptures are also created by the Lord. Vedic literatures are the guiding directions for the conditioned soul so that they can get free from the repetition of creation and annihilation of the material world and the material body. So the Lord wants us to have and revive our loving relationship with him. According to our desire, we are placed in this material world with a suitable body, suitable environment to continue living our desires, creating plans, trying to fulfill those plans. Then the plans are destroyed and we continue making plans, trying to fulfill the plans with the destruction of the plans. And we continue the cycle until we are guided by a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada to understand the truths that these ladies have understood. Once we understand where we meant to go, what we meant to do, and how we meant to do that, then our Krishna consciousness begins. There was an example of one gentleman who was coming from a very poor background in India. And he was trying to make some money, very, very poor. So, he was trying to find a job. Eventually, he landed up in a circus. And the owner of the circus said, I can give you a job because we need somebody to replace someone who just died in this job. And he said, okay, what's the job? And the owner of the circus said, well, we have this bear suit. So you need to wear this bear suit and act like a bear, make all the tricks, stand on one leg, etc. Behave like a bear. And the bear suit was stinking because of the perspiration of the previous person who died in it. But because he was poor and he had no alternative, couldn't find any alternate job, he decided, okay, I'm going to take this job anyway, at least I'll get some money. So he got into this bear suit and he was performing his circus act, standing, making tricks, making the audience laugh, entertaining the audience that he's a real bear. But actually, is not, the bear is not really, it's basically just the person had a bear suit. And at one point during his act, there was another cage that had a lion. And this lion broke out of the cage and attacked this person who had the bear suit. And the lion dropped this bear to the ground. And when this person saw this lion, he was terrified. And he was just about to scream, like, help. And the lion spoke to him and said, don't scream, because if you scream, we both will lose our job. So in the circus, the owner is really entertaining the crowd and fooling them. And both these individuals were acting in a role that's really not their nature or original position as human beings. They were acting as animals. Similarly, the material nature has this circus ground, and as the circus coordinator, giving us these human bodies that is really not our true identity, because we are spiritual beings. And here we are in this human body entertaining people around us. And every individual that has a body is in that same position. And the Lord sends his pure representatives, comes himself, sends the Vedas to educate us to come out of the circus, which looks entertaining, which looks promising, but is been destroyed, has been annihilated. It is a place of misery. The ladies of Hastinapur could understand the true purpose of creation and how the living entities are entrapped. And when the living entities recognize their Supreme Father, acknowledge their Supreme Father, repent for their actions, and submit to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then they can become happy. Otherwise, never. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, this created this created world and material energy under my control, under the influence of Prakriti, automatically they are created again and again. And this is done by me through the agency of my external energy. Actually, the spiritual spark living entities have no material names or forms. But in order to fulfill their desire to lord it over material energy of material forms and names, they are given a chance for such false enjoyment. And at the same time, they are given a chance to understand the real position through the revealed scriptures. The foolish and forgetful living being is always busy with false forms and names, false names. Modern nationalism is the culmination of such false names and false forms. Men are mad after false names and forms. The form of body obtained under certain conditions is taken up as factual, and the name also taken bewilders the conditioned soul into misusing the energy in the name of so many isms. Scripture, however, supplied a clue for understanding the real position, but men are reluctant to take lessons from scriptures created by the Lord for different places and times. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is the guiding principle for every human being, but by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the programs of life in terms of Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of the knowledge for one who has thoroughly understood the principles of Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, people have no taste for them, and therefore they are under the clutches of Maya for repeated birth and death. So material forms and names really has no substance. Consider it's exactly like when you, Prabhupada gave the example, when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, those material names and forms that you acquire in your dream state has really no tangible substance. As soon as you open your eyes and you wake, those dreams are forgotten. They have no real tangible substance. Similarly, right now, we are spiritually asleep. And what we are living through or going through is really a daydream. We are going through our lives, which is a spiritual dream. And once we awaken to our spiritual reality, then this material dream would have absolutely no substance. So this is the point the Prabhupada is making, which the ladies of Hastinapur could understand. We thinking I'm male, I'm female, I'm so-and-so, I stay here, I do this, this is my occupation, I'm a father, mother, student, etc. This is all based according on a material platform that has no real relevance to the spiritual eternal identity and the spiritual being. So by Krishna consciousness, we understand this, and what we're trying to do is rise above our bodily identification. Nectar Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami says these are upadhis, designations, false designations. As long as one has some false identity, I am this, I am that, as long as it's I am something other than that, other than I'm a servant of Krishna, then that is upadhi, a designation. And as long as you have a designation, then that means you need to become purified of that designation. And for you to become purified of the designation, then the material world is created. That means birth and death. So one will continue to take birth and death, repetition of birth and death, until and unless one becomes completely free from all upadhis, all designations, all isms, all names, all forms. The only identity, the only form, the only name, the only ism that one needs to adopt is in relation to one's true identity as a servant of Krishna. Or, as Srijat Mahaprabhu says, as a servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the gopis. In that way, one can, or serving Krishna, in that way one can become totally liberated. Otherwise, it is not possible. Text 23. Savayam yat padam atra surayo jitendriya nirjita mat mata rishvanam pasyanti bhaktyut kalitat kalitamalatmana nan vesha sattvam parimarchtum arhati. Here is the supreme, here is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is experienced by the great devotees who are completely cleansed of material consciousness by dint of rigid devotional service and full control of life and the senses. And that is the only way to purify existence. So we heard the ladies speak about creation. Firstly, knowing that Krishna is the source of creation. Creation goes through a cycle of creation and destruction. The living entities are bound in the cycle of creation and destruction due to their desires. They go into Mahavishnu's body, out of Mahavishnu's body, continue trying to satisfy these desires. Now they are talking about the pure devotees who are engaged in devotional service. So we can see that they know Krishna is in front of them. They know that this personality, Krishna, can only be known by great devotees who are freed from all contamination. And how did they become free? By the process of devotional service. Prabhupada in the purport says, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord can be known in his real nature by dint of pure devotional service only. So it is stated here that only the great devotees of the Lord who are able to clear the mind of all material dust by rigid devotional service can experience the Lord as he is. Only by rigid devotional service. If you practice shallow devotional service, you will get result, but that result will not be effective, sufficiently effective. One needs to practice rigid devotional service, serious devotional service. We find that even in the material sphere, if you want to be expert at anything, one really has to put serious dedication, time, and effort into that activity. If you want to become, world class at any skill, if you want to become the number one best in a skill, it's going to require hours and hours and hours of practice and dedication. That same hours and hours and hours of practice and dedication that makes one excel in a skill in the material world, that same spirit of enthusiasm and dedication is also required to become Krishna conscious. One can take Krishna consciousness very, very lightly, very superficially, very casually, very whimsically. And especially if, from a material perspective, if one is not convinced enough, sufficiently enough, or things are going on nicely, there's no real suffering that's been used as an impetus to become Krishna conscious. So then our Krishna conscious can waver and be very shallow. And if it's shallow, we get a shallow result. So if we find that we are not getting the desired result of purification or Krishna conscious revelation, it is not that Krishna is not reciprocating with us. Krishna is reciprocating perfectly, but is reciprocating with the intensity of our practice, the seriousness of our practice. If we increase the seriousness, the commitment, the dedication, the constant remembrance of Krishna, if we increase that, Krishna increases his reciprocation. So it's really up to us how much we want Krishna, how much we want to return back to him. And if we show that enthusiasm, seriousness, Krishna will test, Maya will test to see if we are serious. And once we pass the serious mark, yes, this person is serious, then Krishna opens his arms more and more to us. Jitendriya means one who has full control over the senses. The senses are active parts of the body, and their activities cannot be stopped. artificial means of yogic processes to make the senses inactive as proof is abject failure. Even in the case of great yogis, like Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra controlled the senses by yogic trance. But when he happened to meet Menaka, a heavenly society girl, he became a victim of sex. An artificial way of controlling the senses failed. But in the case of a pure devotee, the senses are not at all artificially stopped by doing anything, but they are given different good engagements. When the senses are engaged in more attractive activities, there is no chance of their being attracted by any inferior engagements. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the senses can be controlled only by better engagements. Devotional service necessitates purifying the senses and engaging them in the activities of devotional service. So when Prabhupada spoke about rigid devotional service, what does that contain? What does that entail? So here Prabhupada is telling us what it entails. Devotional service necessitates purifying the senses and engaging them in activities of devotional service. So rigid devotional service means I'm strict about making sure that my senses are being purified and stay purified. And I'm serious and rigid about engaging in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, etc. So this is the process of Krishna consciousness. Devotional service is not inaction. Anything done in the service of the Lord becomes at once purified of its material nature. The material conception is due to ignorance only. There is nothing beyond Vasudev. The Vasudev conception gradually develops in the heart of the learned after a prolonged acceleration of receptive organs. The Vasudev conception gradually develops in the heart of the learned after a prolonged acceleration of the receptive organs. But the process ends in the knowledge of accepting Vasudev as all in all. In the case of devotional service, this very same method is accepted from the very beginning. And by the grace of the Lord, all factual knowledge becomes revealed in the heart of a devotee due to dictation by the Lord from within. Therefore, controlling the senses by devotional service is the only and easiest means. So we need to become absorbed in Vasudev consciousness, Krishna consciousness. We need to be able to come to that level of full absorption and dedication in Krishna's service, to the extent that our environment is conducive to our goal. So our goal is to be completely Vasudev conscious, Krishna conscious. As Prabhupada saying, Vasudev all in all, accepting Krishna as everything. Then, in order to achieve that goal, I need to create an environment that facilitates that growth. And thirdly, I need to engage in activities that promote that environment to achieve the goal of Vasudev consciousness. So in this way, we see, just like if I'm cultivating a field, I know I want to plant something. So that's the goal. I then create an environment and cultivate the field so that the goal of planting a certain vegetable is achieved. By doing that, one achieves the desired goal. Krishna consciousness or devotional service, probably saying, is the most easiest, simplest process, but it's the only process that can subdue, control the senses, jitendriya, overpower the senses. Otherwise, we find that if we apply other processes, they may be effective for some time, but eventually it'll fall short and we'll fall back to where we originally were. It's like Robert gave the example of the big wheel. You start at the bottom, you go up and you think you're going somewhere. until you hit the top, and all of a sudden you find that now you're back to square one. So like that, if you engage in any other activities, any other form of activity that may be there, and there's so many varieties of forms of different rituals and activities, in all different traditions. If one engages in different of these activities, we may find some result, temporary result. Ultimately, we will find ourselves back to square one. The only means of becoming free from the cycle is devotional service. 24. So the ladies continue now. Sava ayam shakya anugita satkatho vedeshu guyeshu cha guyam vadivi ya eka isho jagad atmaliya lilaya shri jatya avatya atina tatta jate sajate. My dear friends, here is that very personality of Godhead, whose attractive and confidential pastimes are described in the confidential parts of the Vedic literature by his great devotees. It is he only who creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world and yet remains unaffected. So now these ladies also know about Krishna's confidential pastimes. They also accept Krishna is all attractive. Again, he creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world. And even though he creates and annihilates the material world, he remains unaffected. So their knowledge of Krishna is supreme, is amazing, astounding, is deep, even though they're just simple ladies. Prabhupada in the purport says, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, all the Vedic literatures are glorifying the greatness of Lord Shri Krishna. Here it is confirmed in the Bhagavatam also. The Vedas are expanded by many branches and sub-branches by great devotees and empowered incarnations of the Lord like Vyasa, Narada, Sugriva Goswami, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlad, Janaka, Bali, and Yamaraj. But in Srimad Bhagavatam especially, the confidential part of his activity is described by the confidential devotee Sukadeva Goswami. In the Vedanta Sutras or Upanishads, there is also a hint of the confidential parts of his pastimes. In such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, the Lord has expressively been distinguished from the mundane conception of his existence. His identity being fully spiritual, his form, name, qualities, and paraphernalia, etc., has been elaborately distinguished from matter. And therefore, he is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent persons as impersonal. But factually, he is the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, and he is partially represented as Paramatma or impersonal Brahman. So in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, there are many statements where the distinction, as Prabhupada is talking about, is made in the Vedas, but the distinction as it is what described is indirect. So that means it's negation. Krishna has no form. Krishna has no hands. Krishna has no feet. Implying that in the material world, we have experience of hand, feet, form. And the experience that we have of hand, feet, and form, for example, is these material hands, feet, and form. When the Vedas say God has no hands, no feet, no form, it does not imply he has no hands, no form, etc. But it implies he has no hand, form, feet like your material hands, form, and feet. But Krishna has hand, form, feet, features which are totally transcendental to matter. And we find that direct descriptions are also given in the Vedas by empowered representatives of the Supreme Lord. Text 25. Yada yadar me natamo dhiro na nripa jivanti tatraisha hi satvata kilam date bhagam satyam ritam dayam yasho Vaya Rupani Dahad Yuge Yuge. Whenever there are kings and administrators living like animals in the lowest modes of existence, the Lord in his transcendental form manifests his supreme power. The truth positive shows special mercy to the faithful, perform wonderful activities, and manifest various transcendental forms as is necessary in different periods and ages. Now we see or we hear that these ladies of Hastinapur are very, very acquainted with Krishna's appearances, incarnations, pastimes, why he appears, and his different features when he appears. Prabhupada in the purport says, as mentioned above, the cosmic creation is the property of the Supreme Lord. This is the basic philosophy of Ishopanishad. Everything is the property of the Supreme Lord, Supreme Being. No one should encroach upon the property of the Supreme Lord. One should accept only what is kindly awarded by him. Therefore, the earth or any other planet or universe is the absolute property of the Lord. The living beings are certainly his parts and parcels or sons, and thus every one of them has a right to live at the mercy of the Lord, to execute his prescribed work. No one, therefore, can encroach upon the right of another individual man or animal without being so sanctioned by the Lord. So Prabhupada puts a very wonderful setting at the beginning of this purport, that the cosmic creation is the property of Krishna, full stop. Nothing belongs to anyone in this world. Everything that is visible in this creation and everything that is a manifestation even from the creation, just like the earth belongs to Krishna, that tree in the earth belongs to Krishna, and even the fruit that the tree gives belongs to Krishna. So everything belongs to Krishna. And if everything belongs to Krishna, he's the sole proprietor, and as family members of Krishna, then it is our right to enjoy the facility of the Father as long as the Father sanctions. So in a family, the father has a home, the father has his opulences, and the father will share his opulences with his family members. That is their birthright. So like that, it is our birthright to also be part of Krishna and his enjoyment. Then Prabhupada says, and because every living entity is part and parcel of Krishna, and Krishna has given each one that quota, that facility for them to enjoy, or rather not necessarily enjoy directly, but enjoy in relation to serving the Lord, to execute the prescribed duties and thereby enjoy that facility. No one is meant to encroach upon the right of any other individual or animal without being so sanctioned by the Lord. And if one lives by these tenets, then and only then will there be true peace. So this is the knowledge that Prabhupada wanted to, or that Prabhupada desires to broadcast far and wide. Prabhupada, his desire was to change the way people think in this world. Instead of thinking of exploitation, think of service to Krishna. Now Prabhupada connects that to the king or the administration. Prabhupada says the king or the administrator is the representative of the Lord to look after the management of the Lord's will. He must therefore be recognized by, he must therefore be a recognized person like Mahaj Yudhishthira or Parikshit. Such kings have full responsibility and knowledge from the authorities about administration of the world. So what the king and the administration have to do, they have to make sure that this will of the Lord, in terms of how to engage everything in the service of Krishna, be applied. And that if anybody is encroaching on anyone else's property or service or resources, that they intervene. But at times, due to the influence of ignorance, mode of material nature, tamagun, the lowest of the material modes, kings and administrators come into power without knowledge and responsibility. And such foolish administrators live like animals for the sake of their own personal interest. The result is that the whole atmosphere becomes surcharged with anarchy and vicious elements. Nepotism, bribery, cheating, aggression, and therefore famine, epidemic, war, and similar other disturbing features become prominent in human society. Prabhupada wrote this many years ago, and we can see the reality of this. That if the leaders have no knowledge of Krishna consciousness, of their responsibility, they have no training of how to administer and how to live according to how Krishna wants them to guide citizens and manage the environment. They are only interested in their personal agenda, and then the result is there. So we are really going through that experience. And the devotees of the Lord or the faithful are persecuted by all means. All these symptoms indicate the time of an incarnation of the Lord to re-establish the principles of religion and to vanquish the maladministrators. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Now someone may say, oh, what Prabhupada is saying here that if we're experiencing these symptoms, and it looks like we are experiencing the symptoms, so then where's the incarnation of Krishna? And we can reply in two ways. One is that we find even in Krishna's appearance 5,000 years ago, even as Lord Ramachandra, Krishna did not just immediately appear when Kamsa was causing so much harm to the planet and to the citizens of the planet and to the devotees. There had to be a specific time, and Krishna was waiting for Kamsa to, you could say, exhaust or to cross that threshold of sinful actions. So the leaders can be sinful and we can suffer the consequence. And Krishna may still not appear because he's waiting for those who are exploiting to really reach their limit. Then he appears. And while that is going through, naturally those who are surrendered to Krishna will still continue serving the Lord. The other point is that in Kali Yuga, Krishna does not appear. He does not incarnate. Krishna is described to be three color, not three color again. What a word. So Krishna, he appears only in 3 yuga. Krishna appears only in 3 yugas: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga. He does not appear in the 4th yuga. So there's a name for Krishna where Krishna only appears in these 3 yugas. And in the 4th yuga, which is Kali Yuga, Krishna appears not as an incarnation, which is generally during the yuga, but he appears as a yuga avatar in every yuga, Lord Chaitanya. And in this age of Kali Yuga, the incarnation is the holy name. So the yuga avatar, who is Lord Chaitanya, appeared at the beginning of Kali Yuga and gave the incarnation for this age, which is the holy name. So therefore it is explained Kali Kala Nama Rupa Krishna Avatar. In this age of Kali Yuga, the holy name is the avatar. Now when an avatar descends, then that avatar also has its pastimes. That avatar performs pastimes, leelas, and there are associates that come. So the holy name, the Hare Krishna mantra, has appeared in this age of Kali Yuga, and the Hare Krishna mantra as the avatar of this age will perform pastimes. And as servants like Srila Prabhupada, we can serve that incarnation of Krishna in this age. And by taking shelter of the incarnation of this age, the holy name of Krishna, and by serving the incarnation of this age, the holy name of Krishna, we can not only purify ourselves, redeem ourselves, but also purify the atmosphere and transform the atmosphere to spirit, to basically go from Tamagun to Rajagun to Sattvagun to Vasudeva, to Sudasattva. Vasudev Tattva, Vasudev environment, as Prabhupada described in the purport. So in this way, just by the pros Krishna concept, we can purify the complete environment and transform the environment to a spiritual environment. And really you'll see over time, as Krishna consciousness spreads, the holy name spreads more and more, chanting spreads more and more, you're going to find this transformation happening. It may, we may see symptoms, we may be seeing seeds of that happening in our own time, but as generations come, we will see this transformation happening more and more and more. Prabhupada's purports revealing the golden age and the practices and the principles and the consciousness and attitudes of those who are in the golden age, who are basically God conscious, will be graphically seen alive. Just like we are seeing this aspect, that the result is that the whole atmosphere becomes surcharged with anarchy and vicious elements, nepotism, bribery, cheating, aggression, and therefore famine, epidemic, war, and similar other disturbing features become prominent in human society. We are going through that experience. So for us, this part of the purport is very, very relevant and practical. We can experience it. And we can say, wow, Prabhupada really got it spot on. When the golden age is there, in the peak of the golden age, if somebody reads this purport, this part of the purport of Srila Prabhupada, they'll say, wow, really? That's not possible. I mean, we experiencing bliss. There's devotees, practically all my neighbors are devotees. There's temples everywhere. Devotees are having sankirtan, there's prasadam, there's no poverty. This is spiritual world. They would not even be able to contemplate that there was a time when this was in play. They'll find the other parts of the purports very, very true. Wow, Prabhupada predicted this, thousands of years ago. Such an amazing personality. So they'll be able to see Prabhupada's glory in that way. We're seeing Prabhupada's glory right now, that is able to reveal that if we do not practice Krishna consciousness individually, collectively, on a worldwide scale, then this is the result. Then Prabhupada continues, the Lord then appears in his transcendental form without any tinge of material qualities. He descends just to keep the state of his creation in a normal condition. The normal condition is that the Lord has provided each and every planet with all the needs of the native living beings. They can happily live and execute their predestined occupations to attain salvation at the end, following the rules and regulations mentioned in the revealed scriptures. So even though we have become rebellious of the Lord, and the Lord has placed us in this material prison, but this material prison has all the facilities that we need to live happily and execute our prescribed occupations to finally return back home. So it's not like Krishna decided that he's going to send us to this material world and really a place of torture. There are some prisons in this world where it's, you stay in a cell that's 2 meters or 3 meters by 3 meters. That's it. Nothing else in that. There are prisons where there are cells of 20, 30 people practically staying in that cell. So the prison itself is torturous. But this material prison has abundant opulence and facility for everyone to be happy, to live, fulfill their material desires, at the same time under rules and regulations, follow the process of Krishna consciousness and become perfect. The material world is created to satisfy the whims of the Nitya Bada, or the everlasting conditioned souls, just as naughty boys are provided with playing cradle. Otherwise, there was no need for the material world. But when they become intoxicated with the power of material science to exploit the resources unlawfully without the sanction of the Lord, and that also only for sense gratification, there is necessity of the Lord's incarnation to chastise the rebellious and to protect the faithful. So this is the boundary. We should not become intoxicated and transgress the will and the laws of the Lord in terms of exploiting, but rather with submission accept the shelter of the Supreme Lord and use whatever he has, right, to maintain body and soul, and ultimately to satisfy Krishna. When he descends, he exhibits superhuman acts just to prove his supreme right. And materialists like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, and Kamsa are sufficiently punished. He acts in a manner which no one can imitate. For example, the Lord, when he appeared as Rama, breached the Indian Ocean. When he appeared as Krishna, from his very childhood, he showed superhuman activities by killing Putana, Agasura, Sakatasura, Kalya, etc. And then his maternal uncle Kamsa. When he was at Dwarka, he married 16,108 queens, and all of them were blessed with a sufficient number of children. The sum total of his personal family members amounted to about 100,000, popularly known as the Yadu Kamsa. And again, during his lifetime, he managed to vanquish them all. He is famous as Govardhana Dari Hari because he lifted at the age of only 7, a hill known as Govardhan. The Lord killed many undesirable kings in his time, and as a Kshatriya, he fought chivalrously. He is famous as the Asam Modva, unparalleled. No one is equal to or greater than him. So the ladies of Hastinapur could understand Krishna's appearance in his different pastimes and how he performed superhuman acts just to attract the living entities back to his shelter, to prove his supremacy. And Prabhupada in the purport is sharing some of the superhuman acts that Krishna performs to give pleasure to his devotees, at the same time to vanquish the demons and to protect the faithful. Text 26. Aho alam slagyat mamam slagyatamam yadokulam aho alam punyatamam madorvanam yad esha pumsam vishabha shriyapati swajanmana chankramane na chanchati. Oh, how supremely glorified is the dynasty of the king Yadu, and how virtuous is the land of Mathura, where the supreme leader of all living beings, husband of the goddess of fortune, has taken his birth and wandered in his childhood. So now the attention is going towards the Yadu dynasty. Krishna appears in this world, perform pastimes, but now they're going a little more deeper into where he appeared. He appeared in the Yadu dynasty. So how wonderful, how glorious is that dynasty? And where did he appear? Oh, he appeared in Mathura. How wonderful Mathura is. So in this way, the ladies, they know about Krishna's appearance in Mathura, the Yadav dynasty. Prabhupada says Krishna had 100 million in Krishna's family members. Prabhupada in the purport says, in the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, has expressively given a description of his transcendental appearance, disappearance, and activities. The Lord appears in a particular family or place by his inconceivable potencies. He does not take his birth as a conditioned soul, quits his body, and accepts another body. His birth is like the appearance and disappearance of the sun. The sun arises on the eastern horizon, but does not mean that the eastern horizon is the parent of the sun. The sun is existent in every part of the solar system, but he becomes visible at a scheduled time and so also become invisible at another scheduled time. Similarly, the Lord appears in the universe like the sun and again leaves our sight at another time. He exists at all times and at every place, but by his causeless mercy, when he appears before us, we take it for granted that he has taken his birth. Anyone who can understand this truth in terms of the statements of the revealed scriptures certainly becomes liberated just after quitting the present body. Liberation is obtainable after many births and after great endeavor in patience and perseverance in knowledge and renunciation, but simply by knowing in truth about the Lord's transcendental births and activities, one can get liberation at once. That is the verdict of the Bhagavad Gita. So liberation from bondage takes lifetimes and lifetimes of practice, determination, consistent perseverance, patience, austerity, and penances to purify one from all contamination. So it's a long journey. Here Prabhupada is saying that simply by knowing the truth of Krishna's appearance, which Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Veti Tattva Tektvadeham Punarjama Naitimam Eti So Arjuna. That if one understands in truth, in tattva, his appearance in this world, and then when he leaves his body, he does not take his birth again in this world. So that's the point Prabhupada is emphasizing. So here is a benediction that just by Prabhupada's mercy, he's educating us of Krishna's appearance in this world. Again and again, we find this is a common purport that's repeated very often. Many of the Prabhupada's philosophical points are repeated again and again. And we should know the philosophical points that Prabhupada is repeating, that it becomes ABC. Once we know the ABC of all the philosophical points Prabhupada is making, the blessing of knowing that knowledge automatically will be there. So here is a blessing, a benediction, that simply by knowing in truth about the Lord's transcendental births and activities, one can get liberation at once. What does that mean? It means we know, like the ladies of Hastinapur, that Krishna appears. It's not that he is taking birth like us. He's actually eternally in the spiritual world. Krishna manifests at certain scheduled times in this material world according to his incarnations and pastimes. He performed pastimes which are all transcendental. When we know that, that itself is liberation. And it's only a question of time when we leave, when we meet death, and knowing that we can return or we can become liberated. But those who are in the darkness of ignorance conclude that the Lord's birth and activities in the material world are similar to those of ordinary living beings. And this is the mistake we should not make. Such imperfect conclusions cannot give anyone liberation. His birth, therefore, in the family of the king Yadu as the son of King Vasudeva, and his transfer into the family of Nandamaj in the land of Mathura, all transcendental arrangements made by eternal potency of the Lord. The fortunes of the Yadu dynasty and that of the inhabitants of the land of Mathura cannot be materially estimated. If simply by knowing the transcendental nature of the birth and activities of the Lord, one can get liberation easily, we can just imagine what is in store for those who actually enjoy the company of the Lord in person, as a family member or as a neighbor. All those who were fortunate enough to associate with the Lord, the husband of Goddess of Fortune, certainly obtained something more than what is known as liberation. Therefore, rightly, the dynasty and the land are both ever glorious by the grace of the Lord. So just by knowing about Krishna and his appearance, one gets liberated. Naturally, liberation is not our goal. Liberation is freedom from material entanglement. But it's not real existence of living, spiritual existence of living. We want to live with the Lord in loving service. That is real spiritual life. So we in material life, bondage. Liberation means freedom from bondage. And spiritual and devotional life means real life. Conditioned life, freedom, and real life. We want to go to real life. And therefore you'll see Prabhupada speaks about liberation, but there's something more beyond liberation. Nectar Devotion says pure devotional service starts after liberation. Once we are liberated from material conditioning, then we can truly engage in pure devotional service with our spiritual form, spiritual senses, loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 27. Aho bata swa yas yasa sas tirashkari kusastali punyam yasaskari bhuvam pashyanti nityam ya anugraha he sitam smitavalokam swapatim sma yat prajam. Undoubtedly, it is wonderful that Dwarka has defeated the glories of the heavenly planets and has enhanced the celebrity of the earth. The inhabitants of Dwarka are always seeing the soul of all living beings, Krishna, in his loving feature. His glance at them and favors them with sweet smiles. Now the ladies of Hastinapur are thinking of where Krishna is going. And Krishna is going to Dwarka. And because he's going to Dwarka, no doubt, Dwarka is wonderful, glorious, both in terms of opulence, but more because they are fortunate to see Krishna. They're fortunate to get Krishna's smile. The heavenly planets are inhabited by the demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and Vayu, and the pious souls reach there after performance of many virtuous acts on Earth. Modern scientists agree that the timing arrangement of the higher planetary systems is different from that of Earth. Thus, it is understood from the revealed scriptures that the duration of life there is 10,000 years by our calculation. 6 months on Earth is equal to 1 day on the heavenly planets. Facilities of enjoyment are also similarly enhanced, and the beauty of the inhabitants is legendary. Common men on the earth are very much fond of reaching the heavenly planets because they have heard that comforts of life are far greater there than on Earth. They are now trying to reach the moon by spacecraft. Considering all this, heavenly planets are more celebrated than Earth. But the celebrities of Earth has defeated that of the heavenly planets because of Dwarka, where Lord Shri Krishna reigned as king. These three places, namely Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka, are most important than the famous planets within the universe. These places are perpetually sanctified because whenever the Lord descends on earth, he displays his transcendental activities, particularly in these three places. They are perpetually holy lands of the Lord, and the inhabitants still take advantage of the holy places, even though the Lord is now out of their sight. The Lord is the soul of all living beings, and he desires always to have all the living beings in their swarup, in their constitutional position, to participate in transcendental life in his association. His attractive feature and sweet smiles go deep into the hearts of everyone. And once it is so done, the living being is admitted into the kingdom of God, from which no one returns. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. So the heavenly planets are glorified, extolled, beautiful, but compared to Earth, there is no comparison. But the glory of Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan excels any planet within the universe. Why? Because it is not a material dimension. It is not material tract of land. It's completely spiritual. And because it's completely spiritual, it is celebrated. It excels any planet, any place in this creation. Not only that, whenever Krishna appears, he performs beautiful pastimes in these wonderful places. And even now, if you go to Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarka, you can feel the energy. There are even, right now, you can even see different, you could say, miraculous or unexplained events, activities. So for example, in Vrindavan, where Krishna performs his rasa dance in Nidhuvan, if you go to Nidhuvan, the forest, you'll see very short trees, like, they basically make arches for Radha and Krishna to sit under. And that's where Krishna performs his rasa dance, in this forest of Nidhuvan. If you go currently to that place in Nidhuvan, you'll find that the sand, it's practically dry sand. Yet the trees that are there, they are green and they bear fruits and flowers throughout the year. And what they found is that when people come and plant any other types of plants in Nidhuvan, those plants don't survive. Only those specific trees that are currently there survive throughout the year. So these are special spiritual beings who are still there. And Krishna is even currently performing his pastimes in an unmanifested form, even to this day. And those who are fortunate, everyone can experience the energy, but those who are fortunate, those who are Krishna conscious, can now be able to even witness and see those pastimes, even today. So these are not ordinary places. They are completely spiritual places. In fact, they are replicates of the spiritual world. Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarka in the spiritual world is Bhoma Vrindavan, Bhoma Mathura, and Bhoma Dwarka. And Krishna wants us to regain our spiritual constitutional position and take part in these different pastimes with him. Prabhupada then continues, the heavenly planets may be very famous for offering better facilities of material enjoyment. But as we learn from Bhagavad Gita, one has to come back again to the earth planet as soon as the quiet virtue is finished. Dwarka is certainly more important than heavenly planets, because whoever has been favored with the smiling glance of the Lord shall never come back again to this rotten earth, which is certified by the Lord himself as a place of misery. Not only this earth, but all other planets of the universe are place of misery, because in none of the planets within the universe is there eternal life, eternal bliss, and eternal knowledge. Any person engaged in devotional service of the Lord is recommended to live in one of the above mentioned three places, namely Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan, because devotional service in these three places is magnified. Those who go there to follow the principles in terms of instructions imparted in the revealed scriptures surely achieve the same result as obtained during the presence of Lord Shri Krishna. His abode and he himself identical, and a pure devotee under the guidance of another experienced devotee can obtain all the results even at present. So those are powerful places. Now Srila Prabhupada left Vrindavan and went to the west to establish embassies across the globe. An embassy, just like an American embassy in South Africa, it is described that the embassy in American embassy in South Africa is really not a South African tract of land. In the American embassy, the laws that one lives by in the embassy is really of America. So similarly, Prabhupada set up spiritual embassies, Vrindavan, Mayapur embassies all over the world, which means that the temples that Prabhupada established, those temples are embassies of the spiritual world. And we can have the same result of practicing devotional service in these temples like the Lord is physically present. So the environment that Prabhupada established through Krishna consciousness and establishing the temples was to give people an opportunity that if they can't visit the holy dhams, which Prabhupada wants us to regularly visit at least once a year, we can at least visit the embassies in every part and corner of this world. Prabhupada then even wanted the temples to be educational places where we learn how to practice devotional service and then bring that in our own home and transform our home into a holy place. In this way, we would have holy places across the whole globe. And that energy, that vibration would impact the planet in a very positive, Krishna conscious way. So we should not underestimate the power, the potency of temples, especially if the temples or those who are staying in the temples are following according to Srila Prabhupada. Because it's not the building, it's not the brick and the mortar that will attract people. It is not the externals of a temple that will attract people to become Krishna conscious. It is the consciousness and the practice of devotional service in the temples that will attract souls and give them the solace of this rotten earth, as Prabhupada is writing here. Rotten earth. What an adjective. Consider, if this is a rotten earth and you are in a rotten environment, if you are not careful, by association with the rotten earth, you're going to become rotten. Just like in a box of tomatoes, if one rotten tomato is there and you don't take that rotten tomato out, you're going to influence all the other good tomatoes to be rotten. So either you take all the tomatoes out of the box, leave the rotten one in there, or take the rotten one out. So this earth is rotten means we are going to be influenced by the environment that makes it rotten. We need to shield ourselves. We need to remove ourselves from this rotten environment. And how? By the process of Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada has given us. By the process of hearing about Krishna. Like these residents of Hastinapur, they are glorifying Krishna, they are speaking. This is their talk. The verses that we have covered, this is their talking. This is their chatter. They are talking about these different aspects of Krishna. And this is what they do regularly and daily. So we also want to cultivate the consciousness of these great devotees who are glorifying Krishna and exhibiting their love through such glorification. Govinda. The heavenly planets are inhabited by demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and Vayu. And the pious souls reach there after performance of many virtuous acts on earth. Modern scientists agree that the timing arrangement in the higher planetary systems is different from that of the earth. Thus, it is to be understood from the revealed scriptures. I think we've read that already. Yeah, things of duplication. Just see. Go. Right, I'll just read it again, it's fine. Thus, it is understood from revealed scriptures that the duration of life there is 10,000 years by our calculation. 6 months on earth is equal to 1 day on heavenly planets. Facilities of enjoyment there are also similarly enhanced, and the beauty of the inhabitants is legendary. Common men on earth are very much fond of reaching the heavenly planets because they have heard the comforts of life are far greater than on earth. Yeah, so we read this. It's a duplication. So here, the point is, even in the 5th canto, Srila Prabhupada described many, in the beginning, he described, according to the verses, the opulence that is there in the heavenly planets. For example, it is described that in heavenly planets, there's no diseases. In heavenly planets, there's really no death experience. There's no birth experience. It's not like you go through 9 months of pregnancy. There's no childbirth. There's no babyhood. Right? There's, as soon as one takes birth in heavenly planets, immediately 16 years of youth, one is instantly that age. And one stays that age until death. And death also, there's no old age. Death is instant. So like that, there's different heavenly, you find even in the other, like in Islam, they talk about paradise, and they give so many different descriptions of paradise, of material sense pleasure that's there. So people aspire to go to such materially opulent and wonderful places. But Prabhupada is directing us that that also is a trap. That also is not conducive, because if you go there, you're going to come down. Once your piety is extinguished, you're back here. So therefore, our goal is ultimately to return back to the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Go.
And that brings us to the end of these sets of verses. Next week, we will continue from 28 to 36, which will then complete the chapter. We're going to continue hearing the prayers or the talks of the ladies of Hastinapur, and then we'll conclude with Krishna reciprocating with them and then leaving to Dwarka. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gopramanande, Hari Hari Bol. Are there any questions or comments anyone has in relation to the ladies of the talking of the ladies of Hastinapur? Right, Shamananda Prabhu says, thanks, Krishna Prabhu, thanks for the explanation for difference between simple talk of the ladies versus the Brahmana's blessings, the talks giving pleasure to Krishna, which is the goal. Yes. In fact, we remember, if we recollect a verse from the first canto, also one of the chapters where it's described that even our occupation, the goal of every occupation, Haritoshanam, is to give pleasure to Krishna. We should never lose sight of that. And when we act in any way that gives pleasure to Krishna, we make advancement. When we act in any way that displeases Krishna, we do not make advancement. So because the simple talking of the ladies was about Krishna, it gave pleasure to Krishna and therefore was far glorious than even proud Brahmanas reciting Sanskrit prayers perfectly. What to talk about well-wishers, Brahman, the well-wisher, the Brahmanas were well-wishers and they were wishing well, they were wishing Krishna well. But even better than that were the residents of Hastinapur, the ladies of Hastinapur, because they gave Krishna pleasure just by speaking. That also is a nice point, that just by us speaking about Krishna, we call someone, we tell them about Krishna, we speak about Krishna. This pleases Krishna. And Krishna is there in our heart, so we will feel that. Also for sharing Srila Prabhupada's Ladu Gopal pastime, amazing answer he gave to the family on Rasa dance. Yes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also never spoke about these intimate pastimes to the public. He always kept it very, very confidential. Also amazing how Srila Prabhupada is foretelling the state of the world and so much more, and also referencing Bhagavad Gita heavenly in these purports, which has all the information we need. True. We see how, because Bhagavad Gita has, so in relation to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Vedic teachings, but in point form. And the expansion of all that essence is Srimad Bhagavatam. So Krishna will say one verse which covers a certain aspect, and expansion of that will be Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna talk about surrender in Bhagavad Gita, and examples and expansions of surrender is throughout Bhagavatam. So like that, you'll see you could link every philosophical aspect in Bhagavatam to Bhagavad Gita, and also from Bhagavad Gita into Srimad Bhagavatam. We see Prabhupada doing that very expertly. Madhachana Siddhi Sahara Krishna Prabhu, will the Muslim attain heavenly planets if they eat meat? So if they eat according to the description given in the Quran, then they will get the blessing and the result as described in the Quran. They meant to eat halal meat. And just like in the Vedic scriptures, those who want to eat meat can eat, but according to the prescribed direction given in the worship of Goddess Kali. So there is a prescribed method. It's a license, which means there's a restriction, and that restriction, if followed, you are then able to eat. So similarly, even in the Quran, there is license for eating meat and guidance on how to do that. And if those who follow that, they really, they get purified. Yeah. So just like in the Vedas, if you follow that part of the Vedas according to eating meat once a month, dark moon night, etc., you get purified. Similarly, if they do that, they get purified. So they get some benefit. Those who do not follow accordingly, then they will get a reaction. Nalini Kanta, Hare Krishna, absolutely amazing class. So nice to hear these exalted talks and Prabhupada's purport, really amazing. Thank you very much for explaining nicely with beautiful slides and pictures as always. Hari Hari. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Mother Les says, Hare Krishna, thanks for the beautiful Krishna Katha. During the creation, when the living entities awaken, do all living entities awaken at once? Example, in Kali Yuga, right now, we have a human form, but in Satya Yuga, we were also awakened, but in different species of condition of life. So what happens is, let's say I'm in Kali Yuga and I am not Satya Yuga's material. I haven't come up to the level of Satya Yuga. My consciousness is still Kali Yuga. Two things happen. One soul, let's say, dies at a point where he is in Kali Yuga. The other soul can die when Kalki appears and kills them. The soul that is killed by Kalki gets liberated. The soul who's in the midst of Kali Yuga, and then creation is destroyed. What happens is they go back into Mahavishnu's body, and because they Kali Yuga material consciousness, they need to continue from that level. So when creation starts, there isn't only one universe. And it's not that one universe or all the universes are exactly the same timelines. Consider if I'm breathing, Mahavishnu breathes. So when I breathe, and let's say I breathe for 2 minutes. So I exhale for 2 minutes and I inhale for 2 minutes. So if I breathe, this universes, if Mahavishnu breathes for 2 minutes and 2 minutes in, when he exhales, the universes that are initially coming out at the few seconds, they'll start the cycle, then the other universes, and then other universes. In that way, there's progression, and therefore different timing. Okay, it's not like an instant that and all the planets are exactly at the same time. Different timeline is there for different universes. So according to your consciousness, you will then go into a universe at that specific scheduled time. And you can, because remember, you can still be in Mahavishnu's body when the time is right. And when the time is right, then the soul is then by material nature brought in, awakened. Yeah. So it's not all the same time, different time for different species, but you will go or you will start according to where you left off. Hope that explains that. And Krishna can do that. For us, it may be very difficult how Krishna can create the creation with different timelines, different of these layers or dimensions, because there's also not just one dimension of life. There are different dimensions, etc. Time is relative in different places. By Krishna's potencies and energies, he's able to do that. Bafana Prabhu says, my supreme aspiration is acquiring clear knowledge as presented in the purports to practice devotional service from the vantage point. Krishna has made this arrangement for me without a doubt. I manifested such conviction after reading Krishna book that there's no way one can practice Krishna Kanda without the knowledge in that book. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. His message is so clear. We either have pure devotees running affairs and administration of the earth planet, or there's no peace altogether for everything. Yes. Prabhupada was convinced of the power of Krishna consciousness, and therefore Prabhupada was not wishy-washy with his words. You know, I think you can be happy. Possibly you'll be happy. Maybe it can. Nope. There was absolutely no doubt in Srila Prabhupada's mind about the power, the potency of Krishna consciousness. He was self-realized, and therefore, as you explained, by reading Krishna book and becoming convinced of Krishna consciousness by Prabhupada's mercy, it is very clear that the more we practice Krishna consciousness, we will see the power of Krishna consciousness in our own life. And collectively, if we practice Krishna consciousness in a family or society, we will see it there. And if we extend that even further, countrywide, nationwide, planetary-wide, we will see the effect even on a planetary level. Prabhupada said in the future there will be interplanetary preaching. So yes, this is the power of Krishna consciousness. And over time, as time progresses, more and more people will begin to appreciate Prabhupada's contribution and realize this same point that you're realizing of the power, the conviction that is there for someone practicing Krishna consciousness. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for everyone's association, presence, and feedback. We will stop here and continue next week, completing this chapter. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gopramande, Hari Hari Bol.